Gigantic Pop.
It is September 10th, 2023, and today we are going back to June 7th, 1985 on the Gigantic Pop Podcast. I'm Glenn Rubenstein, joined by Mr. Matt Morgan and Raj Giri today to talk about the movie The Goonies, the summer of 1985, Cyndi Lauper, WWF, and everything that was going on that iconic summer. Matt, Raj, good to see you guys both.
What's up, guys? What's up, everybody watching?
Happy birthday to Mr. Matt Morgan.
Yes, another trip around the sun.
What a great way to spend your birthday with me and Glenn.
It is a great way.
Why does it just loop the music?
Yeah.
It's so good. That music is so banging that we need to hear it again.
I was like, oh, it had a loop on. There we go. So Matt, people don't know this. This is kind of a good starting thing. It's like all of us, well, now we're the same age. Raj, you're about to turn 48, correct?
Yep. Next month.
So it's weird that we're all within 12 months age of each other, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, this is my 47th today. And you guys know how it is. I've been aging myself a year for the last 5 years. It drives my wife nuts. She's like, when you do that to me. So like, get your age right. Like, how hard is this? And I'm like, you think it's not, but you don't really think about your birthday once you, I'd say, hit a certain age.
Yeah.
I think once I turned 40, I had to start doing the math every year after that, where I'm like, oh, I think,
Yes.
you gotta like, okay, that was my 40th. It's been 3 years since I'm 43.
Yes, it's pathetic, but it's the truth. Versus when we were kids, going back to 1985, for example, to when every birthday was like the World Series. It was the best thing on the planet. You couldn't wait.
Yeah. I mean, I had someone on a business call the other day be like, so you're what, like almost 50, right? And I was like, oh, good Lord, here. You know,
it's a whole. I'm not saying it because we're getting there. I'm saying it because maybe our parents felt it. I don't know. There's no way our parents felt this way,
dude.
Because my parents had this over the hill party when they turned 40.
Yeah,
and they were gray. They looked like they were 40 at the time. I would argue our generation of 40-year-olds, 50-year-olds do not look what we thought we would look like when we were kids at that age.
Yeah. No, I mean, great example of this. In Cocoon, Wilford Brimley playing a senior citizen. Wilford Brimley was actually like 49, 50 years old when he shot that.
Yeah.
Homeboy looked like he was 80. He did look the part.
I know. It's crazy, right?
He's one of those guys that's just looked old his whole life.
Yeah.
He's like, he's, like J.J. Dillon. They kind of have that same, And Tom Cruise now is older than Jack Nicholson was in A Few Good Men.
Wow. Crazy. I mean, it's got to be something with like preservatives or the water. Like there's something, right?
No question. We know more. We have more advantages with our health and our knowledge and science. Yeah, definitely.
Oh, man. So thinking about this, the reason why we picked the Goonies, this is, for people that know us from Wrestling Inc. And we found out on one episode many years ago that we were talking about movies, and it's funny because we don't have all the same pop culture references, and sometimes I'll mention something and Matt will be like, I was playing sports, I never saw that. Like, what are you talking about? But normally there are some hallmarks. Everybody saw Temple of Doom. Everybody saw Gremlins. Everybody has seen Star Wars. Everyone has seen Back to the Future. And I made some reference to the Goonies, and Raj is like, I am not familiar with this movie. I haven't seen this movie.
That was a yes. Yep.
And
I was aware of it.
But Matt was the one that was shocked. Matt was like, Raj, how have you never seen this? Like, I saw this. Everybody saw this.
It's a rite of passage. It's almost a rite of passage kind of movie. It really is. It was on in every household across this country back then. It was so popular.
Yeah. And I rewatched it. I rewatched part of it today, and I was like, I can't do it.
It's so weird. See, because I think, and maybe this is where we talk about this a lot as adults, right? Is something genuinely good, or is it because we saw it as a child and it imprinted on us? And
I think both. Both. When I first got signed by WWE, Dr. Tom Pritchard said, hey, you guys should be like asking, we have a whole video library here.
Yeah.
What tapes do you want to see of guys you want to follow in their footsteps, maybe pattern some stuff after, or maybe learn some stuff? I'm like, oh my God. Duh, Andre the Giant, Big John Studd. That's one of the greatest feuds of all time.
Yeah.
And he looked at me like, John Studd? I'm like, yeah. And he was like, okay, here you go. The next week he gave me the videotapes for it. And then when I started watching it, now as a pro wrestler, not back to 1985 as a little kid watching that angle, all he did was like just broad forearms across like Andre's chest in the quarter. It was like basic, not even ABC type of offense. This was like letter A, and it didn't go past letter A. It was so basic. But as a kid, I was enamored with it, and I thought it was like this great amount of wrestling and these two giants colliding, and it was horrible watching it back. And my heart was broken. My heart was broken because I was a huge Andre fan too, and he was toward the end of his career, even back in '85. So he wasn't doing the things that he used to be able to do younger in his career. So watching now, I see why Dr. Tom looked at me like I had three heads on my shoulders, asking for that versus let's say Glenn Jacobs or a Undertaker or more athletic big guys.
Yeah.
80s wrestling was definitely different. But I mean, it was awesome at the time. Like, you'll see the number of stars that Hulk versus Andre got, but that match was, to me, that was magic. That was like,
and it was, and that's how important charisma is as well. Is to hide. We didn't know Hulk Hogan wasn't a good wrestler when we were kids. We didn't care. We just wanted to see him Hulk up. That's all we wanted to see.
Yeah. No, it's true. And I think that there are movies that have passed me by that I've tried to watch later, and I try and put myself in the context of watching a movie or TV show and being like, okay, this is what was going on at the time. This makes sense. I love the film The Bad News Bears. I tried to watch the Bad News Bears TV series the other day. That lasted for 2 seasons, and like they can't swear, so right there, like they can't have kids drinking alcohol. And I was like, well, you have to understand they toned this down. But watching it, I was like, oh no, this just isn't. This is legitimately not good. Although Corey Feldman was in that. That was his first TV role.
I'd say like Back to the Future is one of those movies that's legitimately good. Like to this day, when we show it to my daughter or their friends, they love it. Like they're like into it. So.
Because Michael J. Fox, a lot of people just destroyed that. They were so good in that movie, and their parts specifically. But that's a timeless concept to be able to go back in time. That's like every kid's fantasy.
Yeah. Kids today would watch the Goonies and they would be like, I don't get it. Where are their cell phones?
Right. And plus the sound and everything, like when you haven't watched it for the first time, in the 80s, when you're watching it now, and the way they talk and everything, it's just like, I don't know. It just sounds so dated. But again, watching it like I loved Teen Wolf back in the day.
Loved it.
But if I watched it for the first time now, I'm sure I'd think it sucked.
For the record, you cannot talk smack on Teen Wolf. Teen Wolf was great, especially the basketball parts.
I think I've seen Teen Wolf like a dozen times. It was great. Michael J. Fox, he was at the top then. He had the #1 and #2 movie and the #1 TV show.
Family
or
Ties.
maybe it's #2, but yeah.
Alex P. Keaton, one of the best characters ever.
He was awesome.
No, absolutely.
I mean, you don't see that kind of mojo anymore.
So Goonies came out June 7th, 1985. Never #1 at the box office. It came out. Rambo: First Blood Part 2.
Great movie.
Was #1. I mean, look, the first for the First Blood, the original movie, I thought was phenomenal. Like, if you go back and watch that, but so like night and day different from the sequel. But that's for another podcast. But Goonies came out never #1. Came out 1 month, almost 1 month to the day before Back to the Future did.
Yeah. What a great year for movies.
Oh my God, 85? That summer, I feel like I was just in the theater every week.
And Rocky IV came out that year too, right?
December of that year, Christmas Day.
Like that whole, we were spoiled. We really were. I thought with sports as well, with wrestling even, and then TV shows and movies. We had everything, man.
The Bears, I didn't really watch football back then, but I knew about the Bears. And
everyone was doing the Super Bowl shuffle.
Yes, we were.
Yeah.
Which is still amazing when you think about it. That a team on top of their game was like, we're going to record this. We're going to make a music video. We're going to release this.
MTV used to have music on back then.
Yes.
Man.
We didn't even get cable. You know what's funny about 85? We didn't even get cable until like 1986 where I lived. So I had to go to friends' houses to watch MTV. And I would watch Friday night videos, like the pittance of music videos they would show after the Tonight Show and David Letterman on Friday nights at NBC, which was awful.
You didn't want to like Headbangers Ball?
No, they didn't have that. Headbangers Ball didn't exist till like 87, 88 with UMTV Raps. But yeah,
they had the Friday night video fights, right?
That was an MTV thing, but then Friday Night Videos, actually Dick Ebersol, who later went on to produce SNL and I believe was involved in the XFL, like he was in charge of late night. So he put on Friday Night Videos, which was their competitor to MTV, but it would be like Jerry Seinfeld before he was Jerry Seinfeld, or like Judy Tenuta with her accordion, or like just random comedians hosting music videos. And they would show, because they would watch what's popular. Every week you would see like 10 of the same videos and then 3 new ones each week. And so 85, it was all Wham, Tears for Fears, Tina Turner, just all this stuff. And I remember when the video for the Cyndi Lauper song Good Enough premiered, like that was a big deal there. Like we were getting something a little new on Friday night videos.
It's one of the best videos too. I'm not just saying that because we're covering Goonies here, but that was a great video.
Yes, and we'll talk about that. There's a lot of really unique, interesting stuff to dive into. But I guess my main question is, Raj, I was trying to figure this out, like June 7th, 85, again, Rambo was in theaters. That was a month before Back to the Future. You were going to the movies. Like, what were you watching or into that when your friends were like, hey, we're riding our bikes down to the multiplex to see Goonies, you were like, nah, I got something else going on?
Well, Rambo, I remember was a big deal because that was the first R-rated movie I saw with my parents. Like I
really
had to like beg and plead for them to let me go to see it, and finally they agreed. And they're like, okay, but we're going to cover your eyes during any inappropriate parts. And they did. There were a few times where it was boom. But I think European Vacation came out that year too, right?
It did. I saw that in a double feature with Summer Rental, like the best double feature for vacation themed films.
Yeah, I remember my parents. I went to that, and there was
I think that was the first time I saw boobs in the theater. Was in European Vacation.
I was just about to say that. They popped out. I was like, "Whoa, what is this?" I got the hands over the eyes, but I got a good glimpse.
Mine was my parents took me and my brother. I was really little. I really don't remember, but apparently they took me to a movie called Kramer versus Kramer.
Oh yeah.
And there's nudity in that apparently. I don't remember any of it.
Like that's a weird, man. I just saw Kramer versus Kramer like a year ago. That is a weird movie to take a child to.
Yeah, yes, that's what my older brother told. My older brother told me that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, why are we watching this?
Meryl Streep like goes off to find herself, and Dustin Hoffman raises the child. Then Meryl Streep comes back and wants custody of the child, and it's just like it's a downer. It's depressing. If you watch that, you'll never want to get married or have children. Like it's
I've never watched it. Says I just remember that was my first technical movie I went to.
Yeah,
I've never watched it either.
Yeah.
Technically, I went and saw Saturday Night Fever when I was a baby, but parents just took me. But obviously, I don't remember that. But
so Goonies was number 9 in 1985. Number 1 film of the year was Back to the Future, followed by Rambo, followed by Rocky IV. Then The Color Purple.
That's crazy because Rocky IV was out for 1 week.
Yeah, they might have adjusted like gross into the following year, but then The Color Purple, Out of Africa, Cocoon, which I feel like everybody went and saw Cocoon with their grandparents.
Wait, what was number 1?
Back to the Future.
Okay, yeah.
Then number 7, the sequel.
I think they're only taking into account the 1 week because Rocky IV made 300 million at the box office, while Rambo 2.
How do you know that? Time out. Why do you know that?
I'm just looking it up right now.
Yeah.
Rambo 2 made, gosh, what was it? Oh, they were about the same, 300 million as well.
Yeah.
So.
7 was Jewel of the Nile, the sequel to Romancing the Stone. Had the great Billy Ocean song with the music video. Witness was number 8, another movie I just saw like a year ago with Harrison Ford going to live with the Amish. Goonies was number 9. And number 10, Spies Like Us, which I feel like never gets talked about in
great
80s
movie.
Comedies.
Very funny. Funny as hell, actually, I thought.
I was disappointed with it because I was a big Chevy Chase fan, but I just thought it was going to be funnier. Like it was all right. Because this was after Ghostbusters, right?
Yeah, it was Ghostbusters was 84.
So Dan Aykroyd was, kind of a big deal for a minute there.
Yeah. I mean, but so I guess, the question is we were talking about this, and with Goonies, Richard Donner directed it. He also directed Superman. Story idea by Steven Spielberg. Yeah, Richard Donner
directed Superman.
Richard Donner did the
directed
original
Lethal
Superman.
Weapon. No, that's
but Superman at the time. Lethal Weapon was after this.
Okay, gotcha. But I'm just saying, he's more remembered for the Lethal Weapon series. I'd say.
By some. I mean, Superman.
Listen, time out, Raj. Don't be putting all this big puffing your chest out and peacocking for a movie you didn't watch back in its origination.
I watched the Lethal Weapon series.
Yes. No, I think, look, Superman, if not for Superman, we would not have the modern superhero movie. Like, Superman was the first big comic book movie, right? I mean, that was a big deal. They had Marlon Brando coming off The Godfather, the Christopher Reeves, like that was huge.
That is one that's worth its own podcast, 1,000%.
Yeah, no, Superman was.
Oh God,
huge.
I hate to do this, but I've never seen the original Superman.
Did you watch Superman 2? Did you watch Superman 2 at least?
I saw Superman 3 with Richard Pryor.
Oh,
Raj, how? Everybody, listen to me. This is not to exaggerate. Every kid in school is talking about this.
yeah.
Did you just pretend not to hear it? Like, yeah, I saw that, but really you didn't?
No, I had no interest. I was a Spider-Man guy. I was Marvel Comics, Hulk. Never cared about Superman. Never cared about Batman until the Heath Ledger version.
As a little kid, you didn't think it'd be cool to see a guy flying through the sky?
Yeah.
That's like the biggest superpower everybody would want.
I saw the Greatest American Hero. Did you guys watch that show?
Oh, yeah.
I saw a guy flying through the
Great
sky.
theme song, too. Great theme song.
Believe it or not.
Superman 2, the theatrical version, I think is a lot of fun. If you watch Superman 1 now, you're gonna be like, this is a really long movie. But Superman 2 is an easy watch, and I think a very fun movie.
Well, we'll cover that. What were you getting? Where were you going with this type of thing?
My point is though about Richard Donner. So it was interesting that, and you also have to remember, Spielberg had the magic. Right. Like Spielberg involved in Temple of Doom. Spielberg was involved in Gremlins. Like when Goonies came out, I think the marketing for this was just the skull and crossbones and saying like a new Steven Spielberg film. Same thing with Back to the Future. Steven Spielberg didn't direct it. Robert Zemeckis did. But the Steven Spielberg brand was enough to get people in the theaters.
Yeah, my whole family, yes.
You know, so when the idea that Goonies came out, now I think the reason why this movie resonated with a lot of people is I was trying to think. I mean, again, we talked about there was stuff like the Bad News Bears. There in the 70s, there were a lot of like kids movies starring children. But in the 80s, the Goonies, and I'm not saying it was the first, but it was the first that I saw. It was the first movie I saw that had like a cross section of kids where it was like, okay, you have Brandon the Jock. You've got the different varieties of nerds. Like in most films, it was like, oh, there's just the one nerdy character, but in this, like, there was nuance. It was
there was, but this was one of the first movies I saw. Besides Bad News Bears, where it was kids our age getting over on adults and police and all these, different people that we were, supposed to always give respect to as little kids and always look up to as little kids and never disrespect as little kids. And here these guys are doing what they want and when they want and stuff like that in search of this treasure. I just thought it was awesome. Plus, little kids love anything to do, especially back then, with any kind of hidden pathways or passageways or treasures. And that was all the check boxes for me.
And you definitely see the influence from that movie today with Stranger Things.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you both have seen that, but you see the E.T. Goonies connections in that show big time.
All throughout.
So I think for me, one thing that resonated, you see it these days where you still to this day, you watch a movie or a TV show, and you'll see a character like, oh, that reminds me of this person. That reminds me of this person. Oh, they're mentioning, Seinfeld was great. Seinfeld would always point something out. You'd be like, yeah, that is kind of true. I've always wondered about that. It's like, so with this, when you had Chunk as the kid who's telling the crazy lies all the time, and everyone's like, oh, like the time this, like everybody knew that. As a child, everybody had that one friend that over exaggerated everything. Or like I had a friend, remember when He-Man was popular and they had the big Castle Grayskull that was like huge? He was like, oh yeah, my father got me that. And I'd be like, okay, well, I'm coming over to your house to check it. He's like, oh, we had to keep it at his office. Like he's making up this elaborate story. Everybody knew a kid that just like way over exaggerated. So I love that they had that Chunk character doing that. I loved it with Mouth. With Corey Feldman, I mean, he's just great. But the scene where he's like, oh, I speak Spanish, and he's telling the housekeeper all this crazy shit. Like, I know that's been used in a lot of other movies and TV shows going back to Leave It to Beaver. But it's like, that was hilarious to me that he's sitting there like terrifying this poor woman by saying all these things in Spanish. I still think that's incredibly clever.
No, you're right, man.
Did I ever tell you guys my He-Man story?
What?
With Bubble Yum?
Oh, wait a second. I think you mentioned this, but repeat it because I'm a little hazy on it.
So Bubble Yum, they were running this contest where if your rapper said you won, you would get the entire He-Man collection. It had the castle and every action figure. And so I opened the gum and I got one of those wrappers. I was like, oh my God. And I went, told my parents, asked them to, mail it out. And so every day I'd come home like looking for this big package, with the He-Man thing, and then found out later my parents never sent it. They just thought it was a scam.
Oh, gosh. I am so sorry.
Crushed as a child.
I bet.
Never watched He-Man since.
I mean,
so the way the maid's name was Rosalita. Yes. One other thing I wanted to, I don't know why I remember that. One thing I just wanted to bring up with Chunk, like you were just pointing on earlier, the only bad thing looking back, and I don't know if you guys had this at your schools, but we did. And back when bullying was like a legit thing and you were allowed to do it and get away with murder, with doing terrible things to kids and calling them horrible names. Well, like whoever the heavy kid was in your school was now being called Chunk. And hey, Chunk, do the Chunk shuffle. And that poor heavy kid would do it. Looking back in retrospect, like, God, how scarring was this for this kid? Like we had the 3 or 4 of them that I remember would do this. And I look back and I'm like, God dang, what did that do to their psyche that, kids were calling them that?
Oh, it was crazy. And you know what's funny? I must have delighted the director with some of the jokes about his Chunk's weight, because in the deleted scenes I was watching, like there's a scene where he goes into the convenience store and he's just opening ice creams and just taking a bite out of like each pint and putting them back. And like in every scene, like he had food and I was like, oh, this poor kid. But what's funny though, is Jeff Cohn, who played Chunk, grew up to be like really slim, kind of like Jerry O'Connell from Stand By Me. Like he just grew up to be kid with a regular metabolism. And now he's a famous Hollywood lawyer. In fact, he's Ke Huy Quan's entertainment lawyer. Ke Huy Quan, who played Data, who won the Academy Award this year for Everything Everywhere All at Once. And in his acceptance speech, he thanked Jeff Cohn, because they've been
Very
friends
cool.
since they were kids. So it's funny that when you look at this cast, I mean, Sean Astin went on to do Lord of the Rings. Josh Brolin went on to be Thanos, went on to get nominated for an Academy Award. Ke Huy Quan had his amazing comeback with Everything Everywhere All at Once after not acting for 30 years and won an Academy Award this year. Martha Plimpton still acts to this day. Corey Feldman still acts to this day. Carrie Green retired to have a family, and I believe she just recently got back into acting. And then Jeff Cohn is like one of the highest powered entertainment attorneys in all of Hollywood. So it's like pretty stacked.
How about that? I didn't know that.
Yeah, like everybody went on to do something. And part of that is that I guess Richard Donner felt responsibility for these kids and was always like looking out for them. He actually paid for Jeff Cohn to go to college and go to law school and encouraged him to get into the business. So it's funny. Probably the closest example to this is Freaks and Geeks that came out in 2000 that Judd Apatow produced. And you hear the same story that Judd Apatow was like, oh, I got all these kids involved in Hollywood. Like, I need to make sure they don't become a cautionary tale. So he went on to keep putting them in all his movies. And that's why Seth Rogen became famous. That's why James Franco became famous. It's like, because we had one guy that was just looking out for all these people that he knew since they were kids. So with Goonies, I mean, very stacked cast. And then I'm surprised though, Raj, that you didn't pop for even the Fratellis, where you've got Anne Ramsey as Mama Fratelli, you've got Robert Davi, and then you've got Joey Pants, Joe Pantoliano in a toupee as Francis.
I did. I always loved seeing what was his name on Sopranos? Ralphie, right?
Yeah.
That's what I always remember him as. But yeah, I did pop for that and Throw Mama from the Train. That was her. And then so that was great stuff. Look, I mean, the casting. There's nothing wrong with the casting. Or anything. It's just one of those. It's just one of those things where if you weren't there at the time,
So you didn't. That's why I wish we can go back in time and you could watch this as a kid, because you didn't think them going through water slides through the caves and all that was like that'd be a gold mine to me.
I think that's everybody's favorite part, right? It's just like, yo, where do they got those water slides in a cave? I want to go do that.
So let's see what a mark I was. I went around my backyard and went in wooded areas after this movie came out. I'm not lying. To look for like, I'm not joking. This is embarrassing, but like not just treasures, but like. Was there like secret passageways and doorways? And we had a junkyard near my house. So you can imagine what that was for me to have to go through and sift through stuff and try to find these non-existent secret passageways that I thought maybe were there.
No, I had that too. I mean, as a kid, I think that I had to have somebody explain to me once the difference between fantasy and reality, probably a little after this came out, probably when I was like 8, 9 years old. And I'll give you an example. I bought a book once on how to do magic, and then I was really bummed when I found out it was all illusions, and I wasn't actually going to learn and master the dark arts.
Yeah. David Copperfield came out with something that was very hokey,
Yeah.
And it was like silly things like a magic wand that you push and then like a fake
Yeah,
flower
no.
comes out at the top.
I wanted to fly and make the Statue of Liberty disappear and then decide whether to use my powers for good or evil. And someone was like,
now that was cool. The Statue of Liberty disappearing. That was
I think it was all just done with a rotating stage and mirrors. But yeah, so someone had explained, Matt, to your point, like the fantasy reality thing. And I think still to this day, like I still sometimes find my brain drifting off and I was just like, okay, well, that's never going to happen. You know, it's like I kind of like recalibrated. But Raj, I just picture if we're remaking Goonies in 1985 and there's a young Raj Giri there, the kids are sitting there and they're knocking over that statue and they're looking at the pyro map. And just over in the corner, there's Raj with a newspaper looking at the stock page. And he's just sitting there like taking notes about what investments he's going to make. And he's like, you kids go off and play. I got my portfolio to manage here.
Well, I think there is a certain age group, and especially with, like if I were to show Star Wars, the original Star Wars, to my kids when they're like 3 to 5, I think they'd be into it. You show it to them now, 12 and 14, and it's just kind of, you just have to be at the right age, right time, that whole thing. And I'll admit I did miss the timing for this movie, but I did have some friends who would tell me like I got to rent it, but that was like the year that every time I'd go to the video store, I just get Back to the Future or Karate Kid over and over.
I mean, there's not terrible choices out here. These are all classics you're talking about.
Yeah,
and it plays on what we were saying earlier, how lucky we were to grow up in the era we did. There was bangers every freaking week. It felt like.
Oh my god! Yeah, it was
all
so
originals
insane.
too. It's like nowadays, and it's getting overdone to the point where you have all these Marvel movies now that aren't doing as well as they meant to be in all these franchise movies. Indiana Jones, the last one, was kind of a flop, and the big ones that this year were Barbie and Oppenheimer. So
yeah,
it's kind of like original concepts are starting to come back a little bit.
Did you guys?
Granted, Barbie is based on
Did you guys go see Oppenheimer?
I haven't yet.
No, I watched the trailer and I turned to my wife. I'm like, this movie looks like homework. Like,
I heard it's great though.
I'm sure it is, but I feel like I'm gonna have to, like, it just feels like one of those things that's like, oh, I gotta watch this to write a report. Like, it looks so just dry and historical, and I'm just not at that point in my life yet,
For me, it's been since I'm kind of semi-retired now, I'm doing all the driving. So I can't find the time to go and watch a 3-hour movie and then, get to the school in time to pick up my kids. So it's because it's so long. So yeah, champagne problems, I guess. But if it weren't for that, I would have seen it by now.
I just love the comparison of everything Matt Morgan fits into a day versus what Raj fits into a day.
Yeah. I gotta clip my toenails tomorrow.
you don't have
I got it on my calendar.
Don't have people to do that for you. So Matt, I was thinking about this, and again, we're using these movies, we're using these pop culture moments as a jumping off point. It's not just about discussing like the nitty gritty of the film and everything that happened. But Matt, to what you mentioned about like riding bikes, this movie really had me thinking about the fact that we were that generation that it timed just right before I think kids started getting abducted and like parents freaked out. Like, we were allowed to have our own lives after school and on weekends with very little parental supervision or concern about what we were doing. I remember my friends and I, we lived in Alameda on this place called Bay Farm Island, which was like away from, the quote unquote city by a bridge. And sometimes we'd be like, oh, we're going to ride the bridge and go downtown. And it was just like, it was crazy to think about now that we would do all this and our parents never even asked questions about what we were up to after school,
Literally, no, just until, certain neighborhoods, the parents tell the kids, you got to be home before the streetlights get on, right? Others neighborhoods, mom come out and just scream at the top of her lungs, I'd be like 10 blocks away. But you're right. We're allowed to basically pretty much go where we wanted to. And there was a lot of trust put in us as kids looking back at it now.
Yes.
I also think our parents didn't know the crazy things that are out there that could happen to us, that we do know about now.
And it's weird too, because you think about the rise of helicopter parenting and whatnot. And I think what it became, it's like, okay, so there were some high profile abductions that made national news, like John Walsh's son, I believe Adam, got abducted. That was a national news story. Where I lived, there was a kid named Kevin Collins. Like, we had to all go get our fingerprints done at school in case anything ever happened to us. So there was that, right? So there was, don't talk to strangers. Don't get in the van.
Yeah.
There's no candy or puppy in there for you.
Yes.
Like, there was that talk again and again. And then it became like, don't do drugs. Just say no. Pee Wee Herman's doing a PSA telling us not to smoke crack. Like, it was.
Inspect all your Halloween candy.
Yes. And then it kind of became a tipping point where there were like 10 things to watch out for, and parents were like, you know what? I'm just not letting you out of my sight ever again.
Yes. No, you're 1,000% correct. There's a happy medium somewhere between the two. Helicopter parents, which I admittedly am a horrible one at. I know I am. Versus, the way our parents did it with giving us some of that leeway to learn on our own. Because I'm not saying this is good today, but the lessons I was able to learn on my own in certain scenarios. If I ran my mouth, for example, back then it was accepted that if I get popped in my mouth, if I ran my mouth to somebody who didn't have it coming, didn't deserve it, was bigger than me, whatever you want to say. There's so many life lessons though I learned as a kid on my bike, going all throughout my town and to all my friends' houses and things like that. And that I learned. A lot of it dealt with I'm telling you, the wooded areas, like building bike jumps and
I know, it's
looking
crazy,
for secret passageways, like I said.
Is this just one of those things where, like, before this great land was developed to its fullest, there were still just like wide swaths of nature mixed in with suburbia, where anywhere you were, there was the woods, there was like a big field, there were these places you could go and find pornography, because it was always there, to like build some sort of fort. Whether, or construction sites. I remember we had like a fort that was like a dugout at a construction site. I think it was supposed to be a pool. And we just put a bunch of boards over it. And we would go hang out in this empty dirt pit. And that was like our fort where we would hang out after school.
That's a freaking cool place to hang out. I would have liked to have come.
Yeah,
well, I feel like back in the day, you used to have neighborhoods that had woods, right? Like, where you could go back. Now it's all bumper to bumper concrete jungle, because there's no space between houses anymore. You look at new developments there, you just wave at your neighbors. You could see them through the window. And back in the day, you had the big yards and then the woods in the back. And
it's true.
I just picture if I was going to plan a family and I'm going to tour houses, I'm going to the realtor. Is there a forest around here? Perhaps a creek of some sort. I don't have a child, but if I have a child, I would like him to be able to ride his bike someplace and have his friends try smoking cigarettes. He'll decide he doesn't like it, but I'd like him to have a private place to go with his friends and at least try. Yeah. And maybe he discovers pornography there, as is a rite of passage for young men at an appropriate age. But, we need the right geographic location here.
It doesn't sound bad at all. Like, that does not sound terrible at all. If a person that wants to be a parent one day and wants that freedom for their child, versus being on top of one another, which is what it is all across the country for the most part.
Oh yeah.
Well, now kids don't want to leave the house. They just want to be on their. They just want to be on their phones and their video games. Back in my day, but seriously, like they'd much rather just be on their phone. I mean, seriously, you see a group of kids together and they're seriously all on their cell phones. They're not even hanging out anymore. They're just looking, texting while they're all together. It's just like, man, that kind of sucks.
And not communicating while they're doing that in those few little moments. The other thing is the endorphin levels not as high. Endorphin levels we all get as human beings is much higher when you're doing something physically or experiencing something outside. It has to do with nature, water, wind, whatever have you, sun, things like that, versus the high you get if you're playing a video game, let's say, or your team just scored a touchdown at the Super Bowl to win it, let's say. Those are different types of endorphin levels that go off in our brains and our bodies as well. And it's just not the same. It's not.
And I think there's something to the idea, Matt, to what you said about exploration and discovery, because it's like, it's a form of learning about how to deal with the world, how to deal with situations, how to deal with potential dangers, where you go like, okay, even knowing I need to ride here so I don't get hit by a car, this is a way that you survive doing this. You know, it's like, yeah, I can run my mouth, but I know that if I do it to X, Y, or Z, like I'm going to end up in a fight. It's probably not going to go well for me.
Right.
Even having money and allowances, like where it was like,
Yeah.
I mean, my dad would give us like $1. He was the rabbi at the local temple, and it was right near a shopping center. And it would be like, okay, you guys can go run amok in the shopping center. I'm giving you $1 each. You have to make that last for the afternoon. It would be like, okay, I could play 4 video games at $0.25 each. I could buy, I think it was like 3 packs of baseball cards for this. I could buy a comic book and have a little bit left over to get some candy. It's like I learned a lot just about, you know, the basics of money management through these simple situations. And it's like I miss that sense of discovery and just that sense of the unknown, because like you said, it's like, yeah, on one hand you're like, okay, I could go and get on this crazy adventure, but even just not knowing what happens, it's like maybe I'm gonna go, maybe I'm gonna meet somebody cool and we're gonna become friends, or it's like maybe I'm gonna have some weird encounter with someone. Like every day was an adventure after school.
That was the big part, was for me, was at least that I might meet a new friend that maybe went to a different high school but lives in our area or neighborhood or a few neighborhoods over, let's say.
Yeah.
Especially once I started getting into sports and I didn't have my license yet because I wasn't 16 yet. Back where I lived in Connecticut, you'd be 16 to start driving. But do you know what I mean? So like the bike was huge, and then I'd end up riding to different inner cities to go play basketball, and I'd get invited there from other people on my team and stuff like that, on my travel team. And again, still before I was 16. And that was really great because I was able to learn a complete different culture from them, which I grew up in myself.
Yeah.
And, you know, learned how to navigate and communicate with people that I have a lot of things that we do have in common, other things we don't have in common in our upbringing, especially. Bike was huge back when we were kids.
Yeah. I mean, is it like more powerful than a car in a weird way because you are exposed and on there? And it's not like, I mean, you go in a car and it's like everyone's in their car and sort of anonymous. On a bike, like you're presenting to the world, you're almost immediately socially accessible. Like people could talk to you. Like it was a very different.
I was just going to say that they'll stop you. They'll stop you if you're on the sidewalk and somebody's going, hey, what's up? What kind of bike is that? Oh, I have a Haro too. Whatever the hell. The crazy situations we get ourselves into in meeting somebody new for the first time.
Raj, what kind of bike did you ride as a child?
So this was a traumatizing event. I had a bike, and the front tire blew out. And my parents were pissed because I only had the bike for like a couple of weeks. And so I had to ride my sister's bike, and she had a pink bike, so I'd have to ride that around, to get around. So
wait, is that what happened? You started watching the Goonies and you saw Brandon have to take Data's sister's bike with the little girl bike, and you were just like, this is too traumatizing. This is too real. I can't watch this.
Maybe that's what that's probably why I shut it off right before that part came off today. But I rode bikes all the time, and we have bikes now, and kids rarely ride them. I mean, they're we have to make it like a family outing.
Yeah. Yep.
To that end, so Matt, we talked about this on the Wrestling Inc. podcast. I'd forgotten what a big deal the Boys and Girls Club was for me because it was in downtown Alameda, right on the border of Oakland. Like that was the first place where, I met people from different backgrounds. First time I heard hip hop when that was popular. First time I watched wrestling, we watched WrestleMania. We rented the tape. And like we all sat in the auditorium of the Boys and Girls Club and watched like WrestleMania 1, and that was like a big bonding moment. But I was thinking about, though, when you were talking about like your hunts and adventures, like they would send us on scavenger hunts. And what was weird is we were downtown and we didn't even have our bikes. We had to like run around, and we had to go to stores and ask people like, hey, do you have red thread? Do you have this? And I've got like guys taking me out, like, come with me out in the back alley. And he's opening up his car and going through stuff to find things. Like it was a weird time to be alive. Just there's like, this was an activity for a child. Go out and talk to strangers and collect these items.
Let me ask you something. Sorry, Raj. Do you think that people just, am I saying because it was from our generation? I don't mean it this way. Do you just think people had a better moral compass back then to not take advantage?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think the idea,
why didn't it happen,
I think it was partially playing the odds, where it was like, okay, there was a big national news story, but what are the odds it's gonna happen to you? And I think that honestly, pre-social media, like it was just a little different how people perceived it. I think like, and I think it's like with a lot of things, it's everybody had anecdotes, it's like someone was like terminal illness, right? Now you could say, and I'm just picking this at random, but you could say have cancer and disease rates, like terrible, tragic, life-threatening terminal illness, have rates of those diseases and illnesses, have they raised over the last 40 years? I'm assuming they probably have, but our awareness, because we're all connected worldwide on this amazing, thing, the internet, we're more aware of how widespread things are. When we were growing up, it was like everybody had one relative or knew a person, or maybe we were a few degrees removed.
That's it right there. No, that's the answer. You're right.
So I think it's that the internet, for its ups and downs, like, has given us greater awareness and insight into, and think about it now. I mean, think about the concept that Raj or Matt, if I asked you in 1985 or even maybe in the year 2000, like, how many friends or how many people do you really know? You would be like, well, there's maybe like 10 or 20, like that's my circle. But now with social media, it's hundreds, it's thousands. It's like even people that you don't know the details of their life. Like there's people that you've never met. They're like, oh, I really like your posts and I like what you have to say. Or, oh, I recognize your name. We interact a lot on the same things. Like it's like our brains are filled with like more contacts, but less data about each person. Like the people that we grew up with, like we knew really, really well. And part of that's also just the age, but technology has definitely played a role in that as well, I think.
I'm sorry, Roger, you were going to say something earlier. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, I actually forgot what I was going to say. But yeah, I mean, 100%. And you definitely, I mean, look, on Twitter, you met Matt, you have what, like 100,000 followers or way more than that. And and I've got a lot too, and maybe 10 of them, right, firsthand, or maybe 50. And so it's a different, it's definitely different. And Glenn, to your point, where you do have people, like when we go to a wrestling event or something, you'll have people coming up to you and be like, hey, love you on the podcast, this and that. But you also, not in person, but online, will also get a lot of hate and a lot of online bullying. And some kids don't know how to handle that. That's and that's a thing they have to deal with that we never did.
No, they don't have that balance between real life and online. And I think that's, I mean, guys, this is probably the most old man statement I can make, but it's like, that's the problem, because you grow up on these devices and the internet, and you don't have that separation between what's real life and what's online, nonsense. And I think that makes it hard.
Because you turn off your phone, it's a different world, right?
Yeah.
Like when you're dealing with actual people, no one knows what you tweeted or anything like that. And as soon as you go on your phone, then it's just alternate life that pops up, and it can be tough for some people.
It is. I've asked kids this, and because I'm like, you do know it's not real. Like what happens on like your Twitter and Instagram and comment sections, unless they're your best friends from your classroom or where you grew up in, whatever, people in person. Well, you really shouldn't care if they're trying to bully you and do what they're doing. And the way it was explained to me by many of them, their answers to that question I asked them was, to them, it is like somebody's physically in front of them.
Yeah.
But if there's 1,000 comments in there of somebody being a jerk to somebody on purpose, just picking on one person, that's what it feels like to them. They told me that it's like 1,000 of them in that room with their finger pointing at you, saying, oh, these terrible things about you. That's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Can't imagine what that's like to deal with that. And I don't think it's going to get any easier, although maybe.
No, it's not. It's going to get worse.
Yeah. It's the drawbacks, right? And I used to think about this when the internet first started. We had like a local punk band that, I mean, I kid you not, Matt, like they would make that part of the thing. They're like, oh, we're about like the communal spirit. I mean, basically they would proudly be like, we're like European, into European socialism, and we want community and all this stuff. And they would have songs where they'd be like, oh, this technology, what progress does it really bring? And I was listening to one the other day, and I was just like, okay, maybe they had some really good points about like, about like how technology being in everything maybe isn't like the healthiest thing for a sense of community and like compassion for your fellow man.
So there's a difference between technology and then social media. And I just think hopefully we see it in our lifetimes where there is this cutoff or something that comes and gets interjected where our younger generation understands that I don't know how they make it happen for them, but somehow I hope it does happen where they can see it. This isn't real life. This is somebody who lives in North Dakota. While you're living in the state of Connecticut, you're never going to see this person. What do you care what they think of you?
Yeah.
Well, it's not that easy to them.
No, I know. So Raj, Matt mentioned his hunts in the woods for treasure. I talked about my scavenger hunt. What did you do with your girl's bike you were forced to ride? Or did you just like
our neighborhood? I actually have a friend of mine that's coming into town tomorrow from Fredericksburg. I used to live in Fredericksburg, Virginia, and we had our neighborhood, and we had our own wrestling league, and we would do and we play street football, go in the woods. They were still. The neighborhood was still young, so they were still building a bunch of houses. So they had tons of wood and stuff. So we take it and try building different stuff. And it was. I mean, it was just a different time, but it was awesome. And and again, that community, our whole neighborhood, we would all hang out and we'd all chip in for WWF pay-per-views. We each chip in $5 and that's when I realized like when wrestling was getting unpopular, because like around WrestleMania 6, like we had like 20 people from the neighborhood there, and then WrestleMania 7 there was like 4, and I was like, oh, I'm the only one watching this now. But it was a great time. And
so speaking of
you keep bringing up pornography. I'm taking that was a big part of
I think that was like I mean that's why you made like I hate to say this, but it's like that's why your school you'd be planning your sleepover and someone would be like, oh no, we got to invite Tony. It's like, oh, I don't like Tony, he's kind of weird and rude. It's like, yeah, but his dad's got all this porn and he'll steal it and bring it to the sleepover. It's like, okay, fine, I didn't want Tony to be in my house, but if he's coming with pornography, I guess that's okay. Like I'll put up with his like bad Yoda impression, it's fine. But let's talk. We were talking about wrestling a bit there. You mentioned with WrestleMania. and Matt's laughing because everybody knows this. Everybody knows like one sketchy, weird kid who had access to contract.
Oh yeah, everyone had someone who found their dad's porno mag.
Yes. Absolutely, but the specifics and the bad that's what I'm laughing
at. It's just weird to be when you think about it, to be hanging out with a bunch of guys just looking at.
It's very strange.
In retrospect, when you look back, yes, it's very weird, but
yeah, glad that era was.
You got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, right.
Segue from that. Go ahead, Glenn.
I was just thinking about. I know you mentioned Kramer versus Kramer, but I remember you said before that, like, for you, it was a weird moment when you saw Howard the Duck in theaters and you saw topless duck, and you were just like, "These are still technically boobs. This counts."
I remember as a kid thinking, like, I still saw nudity, as weird as that is. Yes.
I get it. I get it.
Hate to say it, never saw Howard the Duck, but
that one you're not missing out so much.
You're not missing out on.
I mean, Leah Thompson's in it, and she's like, I had a huge crush on Leah Thompson that era, so that was
we got ripped off by that movie.
Yeah,
I'm surprised she's not in more stuff today.
She directs now.
Oh, does she?
Yeah, she's doing great, man. Dude, everyone from Back to the Future is just making bank going to do those conventions and reunions, and
they should.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other thing, which we should talk about at some point. But look, I want to talk about Cyndi Lauper a bit, because a big part of Goonies is Cyndi Lauper, was coming off Girls Just Want to Have Fun, still iconic anthem to this day. She had a string of hits. She's So Unusual was one of the biggest albums of that era of the 80s. And she got tapped to do the tie-in music. She actually ended up producing the entire soundtrack, but she had the song Good Enough. And what's really interesting about that music video, one, that music video is 2 parts. I cannot think of another music video. There's a 2-part music video, and they showed the first part before the movie came out, second part after, because I guess they don't want to spoil too much. But if you watch that movie, Roddy Piper, Bobby the Brain Heenan, Freddie Blassie, Mulo, Wendy Richter, Andre the Giant shows up in part 2. Yeah, the Sheik, Nikolai Volkov, Captain Lou Albano, of course, who I swear to this day, when I still think of Cyndi Lauper, I'm like, oh yes, Cyndi Lauper's dad, Captain Lou Albano. Like, not her actual dad, just played her dad all the time. But you watch that video, and I love that song. It's a classic 80s song. But Raj and I were talking about this off the air, like, this music video came out in June of 85. First WrestleMania was in March of 85. Like, they must have shot this right after the first Mania and got all these wrestlers together from the WWF at the time. I mean, what a coup for the WWF to get this placement in. I mean, this was going to be like 1985's Ghostbusters. Like, this was going to be the big movie of the summer with the big theme song and the big music video, and WWF is all over that thing.
And what I'm surprised most about is that Hogan wasn't in it, because it's after WrestleMania 1, like you said, he was their biggest star. But thank God he wasn't, because maybe, and I don't want to give Vince credit for this if I'm wrong, but maybe he did have the foresight to say, hey, it'd be better if we can give all of our villains out to this, because they're going to be doing villain type actions in this video, right? For the most part. And get other guys over and give them a platform to the national audience besides just our own wrestling show, because it worked. I mean, all those characters that were on it, everybody, if you said those names back when you were a kid, even to a person that wasn't a wrestling fan, they knew who for the most part they were. Even Nikolai Volkov, they knew who that was.
Yeah.
WWF back then, I mean, it was pop culture. You would see, you'd get Mad Magazine, it's on the cover, it was like a big deal. That is interesting that Hogan was never. I don't think Bobby Heenan was ever in them, right?
I think he's in the. Is he in the video, or am I confusing?
I didn't think he was.
No, maybe it's not.
I think it's just Captain.
Yeah, I'm
Lou.
music and Freddie Blassie. But no, it was a good lineup though in this, and
I was 0 days old when I realized there was a part 2. I didn't realize there was a part 2 music video.
Yeah,
I just watched it before we went on the air, and Andre the Giant was in it. I never knew that. So wow.
Also,
and the worst outfit
I know, it's really bad. And if you watch that video, also the music group, the Bangles, shows up. They're playing the female pirates on the ship.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that's who that was.
Yeah, they're pre-Walk Like an Egyptian. They were also at a soundtrack song in the Goonies soundtrack. So it's a cool video. It's on you can find both parts on YouTube. It's really good. But this kind of goes back to something that we've been talking about. Oh,
sorry.
Raj, why do you think Cyndi Lauper is not in the WWE Hall of Fame?
I think because she's probably turned it down.
Why would she turn it down?
She says she hasn't.
Why would she turn it down? Sorry.
That's the only thing that makes sense to me. Is maybe she was busy or just didn't have the time, or there was a time when WWE, not that long ago, was just declining in popularity. It wasn't the hot thing. You look from like 2005 to really 2015. 12, 13. It was on a consistent decline. So, I mean, because otherwise, what else makes sense? Because she really ushered in her Mr. T. When you talk about celebrities in the Hall of Fame, it's her, Mr. T, Mike Tyson. Maybe Dennis Rodman for what he did with WCW. He helped really propel them. I mean, not propel them, but that was a huge deal when him and Karl Malone did that match. Then it wasn't a huge deal when he did his subsequent stuff. But as far as really bringing eyeballs onto wrestling, those are the 4. Maybe Lawrence Taylor, but Cyndi Lauper is number 1 or number 2 behind Mr. T, or ahead of Mr. T. So it has to be her. As big as
Mr. T was, I thought it was Cyndi, because of the original connection that was made, that had to have been made, to where Vince was able to get all his characters on MTV, nightly. They were on all the flipping time, and just MTV was the hottest thing in the world at that time. Alan Hunter and all these very, very cool VJs that we thought were cool, at least, was a big deal to be a part of back then. And I just thought it made them all look cooler because of it as a kid. I bought into it big.
If you go back,
I don't think Rock and Wrestling, the Rock and Wrestling connection doesn't exist without Cyndi Lauper, and that was a huge part of WWF's popularity back then.
And in fact, if you look at the timeline, and Cyndi Lauper, her manager, who's also in the Good Enough video, was on a plane with a bunch of wrestlers. That's what started the entire thing, and the introduction with her getting Captain Lou in Girls Just Want to Have Fun as her dad. But it's crazy because if you go back to the impetus behind WrestleMania, War to Settle the Score and Brawl to End It All on MTV were the 2 things where they really built those up as huge events. This wasn't just Saturday Night Main Event. These were big events that MTV showed. Cyndi Lauper was involved in both of those. And so you saw the wrestlers on MTV a lot promoting this. There was the buildup. See, I think I think actually some credit to Sylvester Stallone and Rocky 3, because I think that, granted, that was 82, 83 with Thunder Lips, but that was like the tease of like, oh, there's this professional wrestling thing, and who's this guy Hulk Hogan? Like that was the idea put out there of professional wrestling to people, and like, oh, that guy Thunder Lips, he's actually a wrestler in the WWF. But then MTV really carried that, and then do the Cyndi Lauper connection, and then you had Mr. T promoting WrestleMania. Like, in my mind, that was how it just WWF became pop culture very quickly.
Amen.
It's crazy to me how so many wrestlers, and Matt, you could speak more to this, but so many wrestlers and probably people hated Mr. T being in wrestling at that time, and like Paul Orndorff and Roddy Piper, they legit did not like Mr. T being involved in wrestling. I thought it was bad for the business, and it's like, do you not get how many more people know who you are because of Mr. T and Cyndi Lauper?
They didn't have the foresight yet. And I can't imagine how important it was for Vince to have these kind of conversations with those talents.
Yeah.
And it shows you, but there wasn't that much of a gap between Vince waking up and realizing the importance of this versus what we go back not too far before that with the whole, Dave Schultz, Jim Stossel debacle that happened, where he's protecting the business. And my understanding, they wanted it that way.
Yeah.
Versus him being the one to go to Piper and say, hey, look, we get it. We don't expose the business. We're putting it out there. We get that. But here's our meal ticket right now to get out in front of millions and millions of others that we'll never get in front of without a huge star like this.
Yeah. And now I feel like you don't hear anyone saying anything negative in any company about like Bad Bunny or Logan Paul. They get it now. And Bad Bunny, again, I think if it was the 80s, a bunch of people would have been negative on it. But now everyone knows it's a positive for the business.
Well, they definitely would have, because especially back then it was much more of a physical appearance type of thing, where somebody like Bad Bunny, they'd be like, what? This dude, you want me to be body slammed by this guy? Are you kidding me? He's like 150 pounds wet wearing boots. That's what the meathead back then would have said. The big jacked up bodybuilder would have said. But I will argue Logan Paul could have fit in.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a natural, and he's got the whole package. He's got size. He's got the look.
He is a heat magnet. He's very good at it. He's great at it.
Yeah.
He blows my mind. Every time I see him, I'm just like, you would just think he's been in the business for 20 years. He just gets it completely. And when people say he rehearses his matches, I don't care. I'm talking about the way he plays to the crowd, the way he just soaks it in, the way he pauses between the moves. He's not like rushing into everything.
No, he knows what he's doing.
Fantastic.
You can see the difference between the I know we're going off on a tangent here, but just 2 seconds. Him and Ricochet in that angle.
Mm-hmm.
The difference, Ricochet can do all those great moves, and he's so impressive, obviously. But the little things, the in between the move things I used to tell you guys about, is what makes or breaks a wrestler. Logan, you can tell the difference. He got it better than Ricochet did. Mm-hmm. If you go back and watch their stuff, their isms in between their moves that give off who they are as a character. And there's a big difference between the two when you watch them go to wrestle with each other. Besides the athletic stuff, watch the in between the move, facial expressions, and body language. Logan, that's why it makes it look like to me he's been doing this forever, even though he hasn't.
Yeah.
And perfect example, you mentioned the Ricochet Logan thing. There was that angle where Ricochet did the flip outside of the ring, and then Logan just slowly took his sunglasses off, and
he sold it. He sold it better than Ricochet could have done it with his own move and saying, "Yeah, eat that, mother Fletcher," after he hits it or something like that.
Right.
He didn't. It was Logan.
Yeah.
Selling it that made it.
Yeah.
Slow, calm, cool, and collected. That takes years to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. Not over the top, just genuine, but he's great.
Yeah. I mean, and it's just crazy now to think about that. Andy Kaufman, WWE Hall of Fame, Mr. T, like with Cyndi Lauper, it's becoming more and more glaring by the year. And I don't know, Lance Storm tweeted, "Oh, I heard she turned it down." But yeah, no, like she denied that. In fact, I think I asked her, and then she
on Twitter,
replied.
right?
Yeah, she replied, and she was like, "No, I never turned that down." She came
Time
back
out.
to do that angle with
Time out. We're not going past that.
Okay.
Cyndi Lauper tweeted you back.
I believe so. I believe I replied.
You believe so? You didn't
I don't
it
remember.
and frame it?
I'm sure I have it somewhere. I know I was involved in the exchange.
So, Glenn, that's a pretty big deal, dude. That's a big deal.
It's not being blocked by William Shatner, but it's up there.
You're blocked by William Shatner?
Yes, I've told this story multiple times.
Are you missing out? Are you really missing out on anything? Maybe blocked by him?
No, I don't think so. It's just yeah. But anyhow, I think so. One of the former WWE writers, Tommy Cass, Tommy Casello, great guy. He said after the way they treated that angle with her and Piper against like Heath Slater 12 years ago, was like, oh yeah, I don't think she wants anything to do with WWE. Like it was a very disrespectful angle. It was thought of backstage that they really
she should have been in
Piper.
before that.
I agree.
That's when they were doing the guest host stuff. But
yeah, no, I think she should have been like one of the first. I mean, and it's one of those things where she's still touring, she's still performing, she's still selling out like really good venues.
Drew Carey is in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it's insane. Cyndi Lauper needs to be in the WWE Hall of Fame. And look, I mean, I can't imagine why she would turn that down. Period.
Especially now how big WWE is right now.
And Becky Lynch played Cyndi on Young Rock. Let's not overlook that. So it's like there's still. I mean,
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I watched that and I didn't even know that was Becky. I swear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Doing a very shaky accent, but it was still fun to see. So I think who knows, maybe it'll finally happen. I know a lot of people like you'll see Sami Zayn or other people being like, hey, I just realized Cyndi Lauper's not in the Hall of Fame. What's up with that? Like everybody is wondering what's going on with this.
She is. There are some people you just assume are in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
I feel like she's one of them.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought for sure she already was.
Yeah. So that music video, if you haven't seen Goonies or Good Enough, the music video by Cyndi Lauper, check that out. Parts 1 and 2 are available on YouTube. Before we wrap this up, I wanted to make a recommendation. Did you guys ever? So if you like Goonies, did you guys ever see Explorers? Came out the same summer. Came out 5 weeks later. Ethan Hawke, River Phoenix, their kids, they find a way to travel into space. They get this old tilt-a-whirl machine and they put this bubble around it and they're able to go into outer space. The first half of the movie is incredible. And if you shut it off, then you'll be like, oh, that was a really good movie. Second half, once they get to space, is a complete letdown.
Only kid movie I saw as a kid back then with kids in it was, I think it was Space Camp.
E.T., right?
Okay, E.T. as well. Yeah, good call. But I didn't see this. I'm disappointed.
No, Explorers. Great first half to the film. Great. It came out in theaters. Like it was a decent hit. But the first half is exactly that feeling, Matt, that you talked about of adventure. Like we're doing something. We're going to a junkyard. We're stealing this thing. We're finding a way to travel to space. Like it's really cool. And then they go to space and it all goes downhill.
River Phoenix, man. That's someone who just he just seemed like he was if he didn't, give into his demons, he was going to be a Brad Pitt.
Oh yeah.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah.
No, one of my favorites, ton of iconic movies. One day we'll talk about Stand By Me and I'll have a nervous breakdown crying on the podcast discussing that movie and what it means to me. But he's phenomenal in that. But yeah, Explorers, that's my recommendation. If you like the Goonies and you want to see something a little similar, it came out 5 weeks later, but it's got the first half. I highly endorse. So I think that's going to do it for this week. Next week, guys, did we decide Karate Kid or Top Gun?
You guys call. You can't do that. I said it first.
Let's do, okay. Raj kind of hung back a little this week because he's not as big of a fan of the Goonies as you and I are, Matt. So let's do the Karate Kid and Cobra Kai because Mr. Giri has a lot to say about that franchise.
Okay. And plus it's current, right? I think a lot of people will be interested in it too.
Yeah.
And is the Karate Kid 3 a good movie?
It's a great movie. And I don't want to spoil it, but maybe we'll tell the story next week about the first fights we ever got into.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That'll be good. That'll be good times. Well, everybody, if you like Gigantic Pop, please like, share, subscribe. We're starting this out. We got our new channel. We're doing this on our own, free from the shackles of the man. And please tell people, let them know that we're back together and we're doing this. And follow Matt, BP Matt Morgan, and Raj is at the Raj Giri. I'm at Glenn Rubenstein. We'll catch you back here next week on Gigantic Pop. Take care.